The indie author revolution has been around for more than a decade, but we indies continue to push the boundaries of what we're capable of, from getting over initial prejudices to staring down perfectionism and author impostor syndrome. We've become a force to reckon with. Now, after years of hustle and grind, we indies are rebelling again. Gone are the days of publishing a book a month until we drop, and in its place we're sowing the seeds of a better way. A way with more ease, abundance, and flow. Get ready to learn about indie authorship from a whole new perspective. We're about to cover everything from releasing your poverty mentality to manifesting your millionaire author destiny. I'm Carissa Andrews, and this is the Author Revolution Podcast.
Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Author Revolution Podcast. I am so excited to talk to you guys today. Not only have we finally gotten on the other side of NaNoWriMo, which is great, but now here we are. We're kind of in the final stretch of 2023. And of course, this is the time of year where I start thinking about a lot of things, like what's coming, how did this year go, like how is it all looking, what can we expect from next year, what are the trends that are coming? And it's always interesting to me to just take that moment to reflect on how things are going. And one of the reflections that I have is that I am so grateful for like all of the people, all of the authors that I've dealt with, all of the, author professionals that I've talked to over the years. We've really built a community, indie authors have, with some incredible personalities, incredible minds who have the ability to just really touch the lives of, all of us. And I'm, really thankful that I'm kind of like in this position to be able to talk to so many of them. And today's podcast guest is definitely one of them. So today I'm talking with Jo Buer from the Alchemy for Authors podcast. And of course, she's an author as well. And she's one of those people who just has some incredible insights and just such a generous, kind heart that I can't help but be absolutely thrilled and like profoundly happy that I met this woman, right? So today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to talk about her switch up to a new genre, which I find super fascinating, especially since I had to do the same thing with rom-com this past year. So that was kind of a neat serendipitous thing that she and I share. But also we're going to talk about, what does it mean to step out of your comfort zone as an indie author? Because just because you've published a couple of books, just because you have a podcast, even like in Jo's case, it doesn't necessarily mean you're immune to imposter syndrome or feeling like you're out of place or feeling like you're not quite sure that you can do this next thing, this next step, whatever it might look like for you. And Jo has had a very impressive year when it comes to insights into stepping out into those comfort zones that, were keeping her in place, but now she's growing beyond it. And I think you're going to understand, or at least hear from her, some pretty powerful mindset shifts that happened, not only for herself, but those around her because of the things that she's done this year. And if you listen to her Alchemy for Authors podcast at all, she's talked about some of these things, but maybe not in quite the same way as she does in this podcast episode. So we're going to talk, like I said, about her new book that came out this past fall, Hades Haunt, and we're going to go on to talk about a lot of different things. So hang on to your hats. We're going to have a wonderful conversation, and I know you're going to find some golden nuggets in this one. Here we go.
Well, hi, Jo. Welcome back to the Author Revolution podcast. I'm so excited that you're on the show again. So a lot's happened since the last time we talked. One of the biggest ones is that you've obviously published a couple of titles. And the most recent one, though, that you've completed, it's a full-length novel, and it's called Hades Haunt. And it was kind of a switch up from the things that you normally do. So I was wondering if you could explain to my audience a little bit about what makes this title different.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thank you for having me back on. I'm just so excited to be here. I love chatting with you. So this is fun. But yeah, so I did do a little bit of a switch around. I'm used to writing gothic suspense, quite dark and moody and all that.
And I love it. It's so good.
Oh, well, I really, really enjoy it. But what I was finding is after one of my books, Unspoken Truths, it really took a lot out of me. It was quite an emotional book. And because I'm a discovery writer, I don't know what the characters are going to do until they do it. And so there were times I was in the writing process and I'm crying to my husband going, oh my gosh, I never saw this happening. And of course he thinks I'm a weirdo because I'm the author and I should have seen that. But, my characters went to some really dark places that I wasn't really expecting. And it had a bit of an emotional toll. So I got to the end of that book and I was feeling quite burnt out, even though I love the story. It just had such an emotional toll on me. And so there is a sequel to it, Broken Lies. And so I started writing that and then couldn't quite get into it properly, even though I know the story has to be written. And I tried on and off for ages and it just wasn't happening. But I knew that I needed to get back into that writing space somehow. And strangely enough, when I started this writing journey and like taking it seriously with writing books and that, I think 2020, I stumbled across these pre-made covers. That was a trilogy set. And they were just really cute. They had this black cat on the front and they're all like magical and paranormal cozy-ish. And I had no intention to write paranormal cozy at all. I thought I was always just going to be writing dark, moody ghost stories. But I splurged and I purchased this pre-made set of covers without any idea what I was going to do with them. And they just sat there, like in my computer looking pretty for a couple of years. And then I was like, you know what, maybe my problem is I'm being too serious with my writing and I need to do something just a little bit more freeing where it doesn't matter if it's a complete flop. I just need to kind of get my writing mojo back. And so, I wrote a book based on a cover I'd already purchased.
I love that.
So the titles was kind of unusual. So I wanted something that had that alliteration feel to it. And I'm a cat person. We've got 4 cats at the moment, and my husband and I have had quite a few cats during our relationship. And Hades is our little black cat that's a bit of a rascal. And it just made sense that the black cat on the cover should be called Hades as well. So I did everything back to front. I had the covers and then I came up with the titles. So I've already got the titles for the whole trilogy and no storylines. I had 0 storylines. I had a vague idea for the main character, who was a character that I had played around with as a secondary character in another story that never came to anything. So I kind of already knew Alice, who's the main protagonist. And I decided, well, I'm going to do everything opposite to what I normally do. I'm going to write a real magical, light, humorous, fantastical story where anything can happen. There's going to be no swearing and sex, which is tough because I'm a bit of a sweary person. And but I also teach young teenagers, 12 and 13-year-olds, and they knew that I am an author and write books, but I'd always said to them, you can't read my books. But just because, I didn't want those angry emails from parents and getting in trouble with the principal and stuff. So, but they were really wanting to read something that I've written, which is understandable. So in a way, I decided to write this book. So even though it was for an adult audience, it would appeal to them too. So if they stumbled across it, read it, there was nothing that was going to get me in too much trouble. So and then I just, to make things even more challenging for myself, I like a little bit of a challenge. Although I'm based in New Zealand and my books are usually written in UK English, I was like, I'm going to base this in, an imaginary place in America where I've barely even been, and use all American English and spelling and terminology, which is a little bit different than the UK, New Zealand terminology. And so it was a lot of fun. And I was writing it and I thought I knew who was going to die and I thought I knew who the murderer was, and neither of those eventuated. And
isn't that funny how it happens like
yeah,
that?
yeah. But there was something like really a little bit magical about this book in that because I had zero expectations, I had no idea if I could write a paranormal cozy. I'd never tried. It was quite freeing. And so I absolutely loved the process. Like every moment, it was just fun because I'm like, sure, this can happen in this world because anything can happen in this world when there's magic. Like,
Yep.
yeah, cats can magically open locked doors and do weird stuff. Yeah, so I had lots of fun. And coincidentally, I had the lovely Renee Rose on my podcast, and she was talking about one of her kind of tips for manifesting abundance and that around a book is to really just love your book.
Yeah.
And for some reason that really, really stuck with me. And although like I'm using air quotes here, love my other books, there were times I really didn't like them at all. And it was a hard slog. And once they were written, I never wanted to open them again because they were just a hard slog. Whereas Hades Haunt, I was really just determined to hold that fun, light, happy, loving energy around it. And I've now actually read it a few times since being published. And yeah, I can't even explain it. I love the book, and it's shown in sales. It's had more sales than my other books, even though it's the only one in this genre that I've written. And yeah, that's kind of the weird story that brought me to Hades Haunt.
Isn't that interesting? I love that. So a couple of things popped into my head as you were talking about this. Sounds to me as though you were open to like that inspired guidance, inspired action. So when you saw those covers, even though you had no idea why you would do anything with it, or like if you would do anything with it, you took that inspired action and took care of those covers, made sure that they were yours. So when the opportunity presented itself, you were ready to rock and roll. That's cool to me. I think that's really neat.
Yeah, it was, I don't know. So it was one of those things where in the last couple of years, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And so now I'm like looking at everything through the lens of, was that ADHD? And I do have that knack of, splurge, impulsive purchases. And I honestly thought those covers was just going to be one of those things that never eventuated into anything. And yeah, but
you
I'm
just like
so
them.
glad.
How cool is
but
that?
I just like them. I don't know. They just had such a cool feel to them, and I just love them. But I didn't really have any intention to write anything for it. It was really bizarre.
Isn't it fun when that happens? I know for me, it was definitely like switching up gears. It's the same vibe where it's such a freeing experience to switch into a genre you've never written before and just see if you can do it, right? And just kind of figure it out. Like, did that feel that way to you? Was it just like so freeing?
Oh, hugely freeing. I think one of the reasons I was struggling so much with writing the sequel to Unspoken Truths was because every time I thought about it, I'm like, oh, but people really liked Unspoken Truths. So what if this next book doesn't live up to that? Sure. I was putting a lot of extra pressure on myself that it had to be of a certain standard. And so swapping genres, it was like, well, I'm going to have no expectations with this. If it doesn't sell anything, doesn't matter as long as I'm having fun and it's getting my kind of writing mojo going again. And it has, because right now I'm in the process of writing Broken Lies, which is the sequel to Unspoken Truth. So I'm back into that gothic-y, darker kind of realm. And it's easier. And also because I know that after this, I will probably need to swap it up. And then I've got the next book in the Hades series to go to. So, it's
kind of fun too, when you kind of go back and forth and it's not just all dark and you're not always in that place, I think especially those of us who are kind of more into the woo, it's hard to be in that vibe and stay there when that's not who we really are. Like, you know what I mean? I feel the same with urban and paranormal fantasy. I love it. And I've loved it for a long time, but even now it's like, I'm not as excited to write it as I am the rom-com, which is super interesting to me. And I'm sure that'll shift and it'll change back and whatever, but there is just something magical about being able to, I don't know, change things up or do something completely different and just surprise yourself once in a while, you know? Yeah.
I honestly, I highly recommend it to anybody that feels like they're in a bit of a rut or so-called writer's block. I think, yeah, you just got to find something that's going to give you permission to not care so much about what's on the page.
To make it no big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really, that was the best thing about it is, I had no expectations. And I was really determined to enjoy the process. Like I really wanted to make sure that every time I sat down to write, I was in that happy space to do it. Whereas when it comes to like my gothic suspense stories and that, I almost want to be in a little bit of a moody, darker, kind of mood to kind of pull from that, a little bit more angsty and all that. Whereas Hades Haunt, I wanted to come to it with, lots of love. And I've really been pleasantly surprised by its reception, which is really cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So you touched on this just a little bit, and we were laughing yesterday that in Hades Haunt, you have a character who has my first name, which is something I rarely see. I think it's amazing. I was very excited about that. So thank you. But obviously that main attraction is Hades and the fact that you're pulling it from your cat. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate, like, was there a true, you've got 4 cats. So why Hades? Why would you pick Hades instead of Gaia? Or, you know what I mean? Why? I want to understand how this happened. There's got to be a story.
Yeah, well, there is and there isn't. Like, I've always been a cat person. We've always had, well, not always, but since moving to New Zealand, which was, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, my husband's Canadian, so we lived over there for a while. We started ending up with cats, just, like adopting cats that were, kind of abandoned or, just strays and things like that. And we've always given them cool names. So we've had like Loki and Odin and Rhea, and now we've got Gaia, Atlas, Zeus, and Hades. So Hades is the newest addition, and he came into our lives, at the beginning of last year. So 2022. And he's a real character. I mean, all my cats are different characters. They've all got very, very different personalities. And so the Hades in the book, he's a little bit like the real life Hades, very cheeky, very smart, but in a, kind of unusual way. Very much has a bit of catitude, is what I call it, a cat with attitude, and a bit sassy. But he's the character in the book, he's also an accumulation really of bits and pieces of a lot of the cats that I've had.
Cool.
So it was more that, so when you think of Hades, you think of like the god of the underworld. And I struggle to write stories that don't have ghosts in. I'm a bit of a, I love my ghost stories. And so Hades Haunt is the same. It's got some spirits and stuff in there. And so Hades in real life, as much as he's a darling, he's also a bit of the devil as well. And if anyone's going to get in trouble and mischief, then it's going to be him. So,
I love that.
So it's a little bit of a tribute to all my cats in a sense. And it's funny because I've had people who've read the book who don't know me on social media, or don't know that I'm a cat person, and they've written things and reviews and things like that, like, I don't know if this person, I don't know if Jo has cats in real life, but she really does know cats. So, yeah.
You're like, I have lots of experience with kitties.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's too cute. I love that so much. The book was so fun to read, too, because I have actually read it. And the twist is fabulous at the end. But the whole time, especially once the ghosts do come into play, it just kept reminding me so much of the show Ghost. Did you ever watch that?
I did, but you know what? I hadn't thought about it until you said that.
I love it. Like all the different characters. Yeah, if you love the show Ghosts, definitely this is a book right up your alley. It's so cute and so funny. And the different ghosts that are in there, it's cute to see all of them and their different personalities and how they interact with Alice and obviously Hades and the other characters. It's super cute.
It is the only book that I've written where I actually love every character, the good and the bad. Like, I actually really love every character. But it's so funny, isn't it? Like, I hadn't even thought about that program Ghosts, which I know I've seen, but it's interesting how when we're writing stories, how we do pull from so many different things, like, and then put our own spin on it. But we really do, from real life, from shows we've seen, from books we've read, and it's largely unintentional. To be honest, like, until you said yesterday that reminded me that one of the characters is called Carissa, I had completely forgotten. And I'm like, oh no, well, I hope you don't think it was like,
and I will say that I did notice the last name Andrews was in there as well. That was pretty cool.
Really? Who was Andrews? I can't even remember now.
Lucy's last name.
That's so funny. You must have been in my mind when I was writing this.
I love it. I love it. That was so fun. Oh my gosh.
So I don't even remember. At the time, I'm just writing. I'm like, I need a name. And it's quite often, it's the first name that comes to mind, and there's not much thought behind it. But there is some things, like one of the characters in the book, Christo. I have a lovely friend called Christo when I was in Canada, and physical features in that were quite similar. But of course, in the book, his character's not the same. And I'm like, oh, if he ever reads this, I hope he doesn't take offense, because it's not like actually based on him. I wouldn't, I just loved his name. In a way. Yeah, I loved his name. And there are aspects of him as a person that I really loved. And so I put the positives in, but it is always like, oh no, I hope no one takes offense to the way my quirky brain works, and I'm just stealing from real life here and there and people's names and stuff.
Well, and you and I were talking before we hit record here today too. It's, our brains are so powerful, like all the different people that we know, all the things that we read, it's this accumulation of all sorts of information. And, with AI, we were talking about like the moral ramifications of this before we had started. And a lot of people are concerned about like it pulling from copywritten information and things like that. And personally, myself, I feel like it's no different from using a good friend who has read a lot of books, or Stephen King, your best friend, Stephen King, who's written a lot of books and probably read more books than I'll ever read. Like that, using them and brainstorming with them. In my mind, at least, it's not a whole lot different, other than, AI can accumulate a heck of a lot more than any of us can in one setting. But still, to me, it just feels like, if you use it the right way, it can be a lot of fun, and it can be helpful. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm using it to write my stories, because I don't want to lose my voice either. Right. But I just think it's really interesting that, you talking about it too, because I'm the same. I incorporate so much of what I've read or what I've seen, or, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of reading in your genre and understanding what expectations are. I mean, it's part of the process. And so I just find it a really fascinating way that we all, I mean, whether you're using AI or using your own experiences, we as authors, we're going to hold something new and cool based off of what we love and what we've read and all the things. It's great.
Absolutely. Like I do believe all of us writers, all of us authors, we are thieves. Like we steal ideas and things. There's that saying, there's no new stories under the sun, or something like that. And I talk to my students often about that too, because some of them, sometimes they'll come up with a similar idea, but the way that they write that idea into a story is going to be completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Their characters are going to be different. The dialogue's going to be different. But I also have them with their writer's notebooks, pay attention to the world, be that person who's eavesdropping on conversations in the supermarket or in the playground and that, and jot those, like we're like little crows or magpies going around and stealing all those juicy bits that we can somehow put into our stories. And and I'm not talking plagiarism or anything like that, because we're always, if we're doing this properly, we're putting our own spin, our own words into all this, and using AI for idea generation, and that, I guess, is really just the same, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I do that sort of thing all the time too, with like close friends or overhearing conversations. My character Jinx in the Accidental Alpha series is based off of one of my close friends, and she does some crazy things, and I love her to pieces. And so I've stolen some of the silly things that she's done. I mean, obviously with her permission, she doesn't mind. But it's just so much fun to be that person who gets the inspiration from all sorts of sources,
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah. It's what I think we innately do. It's yeah.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
fun.
So you and I were talking too that you've been branching out, obviously more than just genre wise lately. You've attended a local horror writing workshop. You've attended your first local book fair. I personally love in-person events, whether it be book signings or book, where you're just selling stuff, or whether it's, author conferences. It's just a lot of fun for me. But what has that experience been like for you? Because if it's new and you're just kind of getting out there in that local sphere, I know a lot of authors are kind of a little bit freaked out about that. Were you freaked at all? Yeah.
Yeah, completely, utterly. Like, it was such a big jump out of my comfort zone. So I am a huge introvert that sometimes people don't see me as an introvert because, I'm a teacher, so I've got to be on all the time. And then, of course, with my podcast and everything, like, it's a little bit different. You're chatting, you're just doing your thing. But behind the scenes, I'm like a big introvert, and too much peopling. I get like people hangovers sometimes if I'm around people too much. It's a thing. It's a thing.
It is.
And and so I'd been living this lovely little author life where, I've got my podcast and I got my books and I'm got my website and I'm, connecting with people through social media and chatting to authors all around the world and doing all this cool stuff and selling most of my books overseas. Like, New Zealand, we're a really little country. It's really hard to get indie published books into bookstores here. A lot of effort and not much reward for that. And so my sales in that is primarily in the US, with Canada, UK, and even Australia kind of following close behind there. And so there was the opportunity to connect a little bit more in my local area. So I live in a city called Hamilton, and there was Hamilton Book Month in August. And I just thought, I kind of should probably put myself out there. And, nobody in New Zealand knows me, but maybe I should try and make some connections with other authors here. That's what the cool kids are doing. I probably need to do that.
And if nothing else, let them know about your podcast. Oh,
I know. It was so weird. There was so much imposter syndrome with it. And so my first little thing is I attended, it was just like for 3 hours or a couple of hours or something, a little workshop by the author Lee Murray, who's like, I think she's won the Bram Stoker Prize Award like 5 times or something for horror writing. Oh. Like, she's amazing. And so it was quite an intimate little workshop. There was probably maybe 15 of us or something. And I was really, really nervous. And I'm sitting there, and the first thing we've got to do is introduce ourselves, which is an introvert's like nightmare to, wait till your turn to say who you are. And I keep thinking in my head, okay, I'm just going to pretend I'm like on the podcast and I'm really confident in who I am. And so I'm going to say, I'm Jo Buer and I'm a Gothic suspense author and paranormal cozy author and have this podcast. And so I was faking all the confidence. And the woman across the table from me was like, oh, wow, so you're really into this. You're really into writing. And I'm like, well, actually, I am. I am.
Wait a second, I am.
Yeah. But it was such a weird thing because I was really feeling like I had to fake this confidence in something that I don't feel like I fake normally. Like I feel quite confident talking about being an author and having a podcast and that in any other situation. But because it was in my local sphere, I was a little bit like, I don't know, there was a big imposter syndrome. Like, oh my gosh, people are going to find out I'm actually a fake or something. I don't know. But but what was cool was in the workshop, there were people from like at all stages. Some people who had just thought they might be interested in writing and so wanted to learn a little bit more. There were people who had published like 40 plus books, which was just mind blowing to me. And so there were people at all different stages of writing or a writing career. And so that was my first kind of introduction and just kind of learning how lovely actually, the author community here is, which was fantastic. And so I signed up to a local author book fair. And it was my first signing event, and I had no idea what to expect. We had to talk for, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 minutes about our book, but it was very like, you've only got this amount of time to talk about your book. And and it was my first time having a table set up. And so I spent weeks of anxiety going, oh my gosh, what do you have on a table? Like, do I have enough books? Do I have too many books? Is this gonna, like I was overthinking everything, what to wear, what to say, how to sign my name. Like, it was ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. And then so I had so much anxiety around it and thinking, oh, I'm going to be showing up with all these people who've done lots of book fairs before, and who am I? And, and I'm like, well, I've got to try and invite as much family and friends as possible, because I don't want to be that one person standing there kind of like, I'd worked in bookstores in Canada, and I always remember feeling horrible for some of the authors who would have a table set up for book signings and then nobody going to their table. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person that's there feeling really awkward because no one's talking to them and no one's looking at their books. And so I tried to invite as many people as I could. Not many of them could make it, so that was disappointing.
You're like, dang it.
But it was such an amazing experience, because as soon as I got there and set up my table and kind of looked around, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I actually do belong. Like, it just, I've got as many books or, more than some people. Some people have got more than me. But all of a sudden there was just some kind of, I don't know, spark of confidence that just made me feel like, yeah, you know what? These are my people. I actually do belong here. I've, can claim a place here. And it was amazing.
You would not have that. Yeah.
No. And there were so many amazing things that came out of it. And so if anybody is sitting on the fence of attending local author things, I highly recommend you give it a go. Because so not only was I flat out busy, like after my talk and selling books and that, it was just one person after the other, which was amazing. It was such an awesome experience for the people that I connected with. Like, I met so many amazing authors. The organizer of the event actually sent an email out to all the authors that attended about my podcast, Alchemy for Authors. So I'm like pretty booked out pretty much until the end of the year, which is fantastic. And other opportunities. So I've signed up for some larger local events for next year, which would be very cool. And I just learned a lot, but it gave me a lot of confidence. And one of the unexpected surprises from it was I did have a few family members attend, like my mum and my dad, who aren't together. So there was a bit of traveling, and my brother as well came, and my husband, of course. And what was interesting is that even though my mum and my dad and my husband and that had always been supportive, I think them seeing me get up and do a bit of a speech and then having this table set up with physical piles of books, because I generally sell more ebooks, I guess, for the likes of my brother and my husband, I think it kind of made them see me in a different light. So my brother had never really mentioned anything about me writing books. He'd never really asked or seemed to show any interest. And I know he was quite, and I guess, maybe it's different when you're just talking about, oh yeah, I wrote a book, and they don't see physical evidence or something. But I think I kind of held my own and looked like I belonged. And it was just interesting hearing like my brother going, oh my gosh, like I had no idea. And they're like real books and you've got piles of them. I'm like, yeah, it's what I do.
Right.
And even my husband, who, he knows what goes on. He sees the crazy hours I put in and everything. There was something that I think just changed for him too, because just some of the conversations afterwards, and he was like, oh, you know what? I'll cook dinner tonight because I know, I can really, you've got to get back to your books. And, you're like, and he's just talking about it. Yeah. There was a subtle shift from, I think, him maybe thinking of it as more of a hobby to like, oh no, this is a business. This is a real thing, and your career and where you're heading full time, like down the path.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that was really, so that was really interesting seeing some of those people close to me get it, I guess. Yeah, because if you're not an author or you're not a writer, then I think it's hard to actually get it. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well.
As you made that transition too, realizing that you do belong there, it probably transcended to them where they could see it and feel it coming off of you too, where that epiphany kind of clicked for all of you. I think that's really cool. That's awesome.
Like even my dad was like, oh my gosh, he's like, I don't think I've ever seen you so happy. He's like, you just, and I'm like, well, I'm a happy person, but he's like, no, but it was something different. Like you just like came alive being there.
That's so cool.
So it was, so getting involved in local activities with like other authors and writers and things like that, I am now just a huge advocate for. So if anybody's on the fence and like me and feeling a little bit nervous and imposter syndrome and that, I think just do it, because it is amazing. The doors are opens, and even sales have continued since then, which is crazy. Like, well, it's not crazy. It's amazing. It's awesome. Yeah. But it was a surprise to me that, that
is so cool. So was there, like, obviously you had to pep talk yourself to get out of the imposter syndrome. Was there any tools or tricks that you kind of deployed other than just fake it till you make it? Or was that kind of like the big one where you kind of went in there going, I've got, 60 plus episodes of my podcast. Let's go. Like, what was that like for you?
There's always, for me anyway, there's always a little bit of that feeling of like, you just got to fake it till you make it. But it was also that it's the knowing too, because I think we all experience imposter syndrome. And so there's that knowledge that, I'm feeling this way, but that doesn't mean that I am an imposter. Just because I'm feeling that way doesn't mean that that's the reality of the situation, and doesn't mean that I will always feel that way. Yes. So I think it was also being really cognizant of that, and then just trying to talk, that inner talk, pep myself up a little bit with, but I have written some books. I've had good reviews. I am selling books. I've had amazing guests on my podcast, and I've got 60 odd episodes now. And, I'm, like I do. It's kind of one of those weird things in that I tend to think of my author career and that officially starting in like 2020, because that was when I first published my first book. But in reality, like I had short stories and that published in literary journals and that in like 2014, 2015, that kind of thing. And I had been writing my entire life. Like, right. So I've been an author longer than I've been a published author, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think it was, just trying to be a cheerleader for myself. Because we have to, don't we? Like we've got to be our biggest cheerleader, because sometimes our friends and family are just not going to get it. So we can't depend on them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you kind of, pep talked yourself too, because it's that whole concept of reaching for that better feeling thought so that you can continue to manifest and bring forward what you really do want, and transition your inner world, your inner experience to be more reflected on the outside. And so that you're in harmony and alignment with it as well. That's so cool.
Yeah. So, but it did take me by surprise, the imposter syndrome, because you always feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, but it's usually most of the times in my author sphere, it's not so bold and in my face. And so it's easy to kind of push aside. Whereas when it came to these local events, it was scary how strong it kind of came out and kind of slapped me in the face. I wasn't expecting that, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's always scary those first few times too. Like just anything new, really, that you're putting yourself out there in a new way. I remember the first time doing, like a Facebook Live. I think it was 2017, and literally, like, I think I had one person that hopped on. And it was probably a friend, right? But I was so nervous about doing this Facebook Live thing. I had no idea why I was even doing it, but I just knew I had to give it a try. And it was scary. Or doing audiobooks for the first time. It's scary because people might listen to this thing later. But as you get going, you get more confidence about it. I bet it was the same for the podcast, right? I know it was for me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And there are still times where I get a little bit nervous depending upon who the guest is. Like I was saying to you before we started recording this, like there was a little bit of nerves too about coming on here and going, oh, well, now I'm on, the other side of the conversation. And yeah, so there's always a little bit of nerves, but you do get more confident. Yeah, for sure. The more you do something, for sure.
I think that's so cool. And I think with you, I mean, having the podcast and then obviously being a teacher, that must have helped, even though you're an introvert, with that whole like getting up and having to talk a little bit about your books at that event. You know what I mean? Because if you didn't have those things, even that would have been another hurdle to jump over.
Yeah, it definitely would have been harder. It's still like I had a school event last week where it was an evening where I had to do a little bit of a speech in front of parents. And so insanely nervous. And it's ridiculous because I can get up in front of a bunch of kids and I'm completely at ease and can be goofy and silly and chat, and I can get on a podcast and I'm relatively okay. But standing in front of adults is a whole different thing.
They're scary.
And so I was really trying to, with my little, it was only like 3 or 4 minutes, but with my little speech at the book fair, I was standing behind a podium and I'm like, I'm just going to try and embrace my teacher persona here and just pretend I'm, in front of a class so I can just be, more natural, more myself. But I am so glad that there was a podium there because my legs were shaking so badly. And I got off and like everyone was like, oh, wow, you look so calm. And so like, I'm like, oh my gosh, no, like my heart was racing. My legs were literally jelly behind the podium. It was ridiculous.
But you did it, and I'm sure you did fabulous. Yeah, it was fabulous anyway. So we need to talk about these 60 episodes of podcast, which congratulations, by the way, getting this far.
Thank you.
What has this past year of podcasting been like? And obviously this is like quite a while, right? So you're going into your second year podcasting. How are you liking it?
Oh, I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So, it was so weird. It was another thing that just kind of started off on a whim of like completely out of my comfort zone, being an introvert. I'm like, oh, I can't talk to complete strangers. Like I can't do that in normal everyday life. How am I going to do that? Yeah, with a recording. Yeah, so those first few episodes, well, quite a few episodes, incredibly nervous. And when I started the beginning of 2022, I was doing an episode every week, which was great. And I loved it, but so time consuming because I do all of it myself, the editing and the graphics, the audio. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist and not particularly fast at stuff. So I'd started a new job and I'm in education. So the hours are insane. And then trying to put out a podcast episode every week was a big recipe for burnout on top of trying to write books and stuff as well. So I did cut it back, I think it was this year, to every fortnight. So every 2 weeks I put out an episode, and gives it a little bit more of a breather. But I do find myself getting a bit antsy, like I want to put out an episode every week. But yeah, I want to stick to this a little bit longer until I have a little bit better of a work-life balance to be able to make that happen. But yeah, so I would be much further ahead with more episodes if I was doing it every week. But I'm really enjoying it. And the best part is that I have an excuse to talk to other authors and other writers and other amazing people who are doing really cool things. And and I'm really high on the Strengths Finder with Learner. And so I get to learn from all these amazing people. So it's a little bit of a selfish act in some ways that I get to, invite people on, pick their brains. Yeah, but it's been such a fun ride. And I hear lots of positives. I get some nice DMs and things like that and email messages about my certain episodes and that, and I've started to see, like, I've got buy me a coffee set up, and and I'm getting more and more of those kind of donations and that from people that really like
cool.
the podcast. So yeah, it's so fun. I can't imagine not doing it. So I'm just running with this for as long as I can, I guess. So
That's so cool. Has there been
Yeah.
anything about podcasting and doing what you're doing that surprised you?
Gosh, well, it surprises me that I'm keeping it going and I'm still loving it. Like honestly, I was when I started podcasting, I was told of pod fade, right? And different people say, oh, it's after your 9 episodes, a lot of people stop podcasting, and that's when podcasts kind of disappear into the ether and whatnot. And I was really determined not to be that person. And I admit I've had moments where I've been like, oh my gosh, like everything's falling apart and I can't get guests on, or there's, slower moments. And then I'll wait it out, and all of a sudden there's like, I've got 1 million interviews booked and everything's crazy again, which is great.
Yeah,
But
it goes in ebbs and flows, doesn't it?
It really does. I think the most surprising thing to me is just that the episodes connect with other people, because like I said, it's a little bit of a selfish act originally, in that I just want to talk to cool people and learn cool stuff. And if others, listeners get anything out of it, that's awesome. But yeah, I've just had people come back to me and say that they're just really resonated with some of the episodes. I think it always, so this is the imposter syndrome again, but when I throw in a solo episode, those are the ones I'm usually the most anxious about. And I don't mean to, but I usually advertise much less. And I don't know, I'm just a little bit more tentative about them, but they're quite often the ones that I get the most replies from or have resonated with the most people, which is always quite surprising to me, because I still think of myself as a bit of a baby in the author world, and I'm just like figuring stuff out as I go along. And
I love that though. Fun. Because of the learner in you, having podcast guests on is going to be so great, because there are people that are going to be asking the same questions or wanting to know the same things you're asking about. So it makes you the perfect person to be, talking to people and asking those questions, bringing things on and trying to dig through it all. I think that's so cool. Plus you obviously love it. So that aspect just shines. That's neat.
I absolutely adore it. And then when I have amazing guests like yourself on, right? Well, this is the thing, like the ideas that come to me, because the last episode that you were on, we were talking about AI, but we're also talking about selling direct, which was one of those things that was way back in the very, very back of my mind. And I hadn't really thought anything about it. I've got like PayHip and BookFunnel set up on my website, and I think I have from the beginning just for ebooks. But yeah, you talking about selling direct, and it was a little bit like my book covers for Hades Haunt. There was that little bit of a spark, and I'm like, ooh, okay, this is going to be something. It's not going to be something right now for me, because I've got, other priorities with book deadlines and stuff. But you've definitely planted that seed that I know where I'm headed now, and then that's definitely in my future is looking at the Shopify and getting set up and stuff like that. So so there's cool things like that. Yeah.
It's so fun, and with your bookstore background too, it's going to feel fun. It's going to feel like, oh my gosh, I've done this before. I could do this. Yeah. It's so fun to be able to come up with ways to bundle the books together or make people excited about the books, or think about how the experience on your store is going to be for the readers. And as long as you look at it as like a work in progress, where it's okay if it starts out a certain way first and it evolves, that's cool, because now it's like you're learning little bits here and there. I'll just give you an example. I was in one of the direct sales Facebook groups, and I can't remember who had mentioned it, but they were talking to a reader from their site, and they were talking about how they love, buying books and stuff from other authors from their direct stores. But the problem that they have is they don't know whether or not they've bought the book before, because of a lot of our author sites don't have the capability of knowing that. So of course I had to do some digging, and I figured out how to create the customer profile and have like a wish list and everything. So now they can see, which books have they purchased before, which ones do they want to have, put it in a wish list, whatever. And so it's like little things like that you don't even think about. And now when you stumble upon it, now you can add it or, just evolve the stories just a little bit or add new things. It's been so fun just to play around with and try to figure out how to make it more engaging for readers.
I'm really excited. And I am somebody who I feel like I've always gone in eyes wide open with the whole author thing, in that I'm not in it for the get rich fast kind of thing. Like, I know it's just, it's a little bit of a slow burn for me also because, I work full time in other areas and do other things. So I have no expectations of huge overnight success, right? So I'm excited to hopefully January start to look at what a Shopify store is going to look like for me and gradually, take that time to gradually build things up. But it's also one of those things that I don't know why it hadn't really come into my sphere until you started talking about it. But it aligns really closely with why I'm an indie author in the first place. Like I love having that control over my business and not being at the whim of other people. Like I love that. And that's why I also went wide right from the beginning instead of KU, even though, it can be a slower, like I had always been told, when you're starting out, going wide straight off the bat, it might be just a little bit of a slower burn to kind of get similar sales to where you might if you were straight into KU or something.
I think it's the same for people who are coming out of KU for sure. At least I've experienced that for myself. It is definitely a slower burn.
Yeah. And I've been okay with that. And so I think I'm kind of lucky that I started this career being okay right from the bat of having that slower burn, having a second income, to support it all. And so I don't need that huge influx of cash right away. But I've always had that kind of mentality that I want to go further and further into having more control. So yeah, with the craziness of the world and that we've seen firsthand over the last few years and how, security can be taken away with a click of your fingers, not having all your eggs in the one basket or having a little bit more control over those eggs too for yourself is really important. So I definitely think it's a direction that I'm going to, I can see myself definitely going in that direction for sure.
Right. I can too for you for sure, because it's just as long as you're not scared of the process and you're not scared of like what it's going to look like, the sky's the limit, right? It's all about what you're willing to do, what you're willing to, explore and see how it works for you. It's so great. And even though it is a slower burn, even though it is a little bit of a, I don't know, somewhat tricky thing to make sure that readers in your genre are understanding, that it's okay to purchase from you, that yes, you are going to get your books, that here's how it's going to work. I think having the Shopify store, and I think we said this on your show too, having that store that looks a lot like other people's stores and the process looks the same, the layouts are similar, it looks like Taylor Swift's merch store, whatever, all the things where they've interacted with the Shopify store before, it gives them that level of comfort and they understand how it's going to work. And it doesn't, like every time they purchase is just a little bit more that they're trusting of those sites,
Yeah.
Great.
And I definitely think it's where everything's trending. Like I think this is the direction. So whether you're kind of jumping on this now or not, I think most authors are going to have to at some point. So it could be years down the line, but I do think this is kind of where we're headed. So and that's fun. That's exciting.
It is, especially when you think like I'm no longer like beholden to just the retailers. I have the opportunity to engage with my readers on my site, to, get paid almost the full price, obviously, for my book, to get it now versus 2 months from now, like all the different things. It's just like, why not give it a whirl and see what happens, so cool.
Exactly. And I love the retailers, and it's not about cutting them out or anything either, but you're a business. And so you want to do what's best for you and for your customers. Right. And and it's giving them another avenue to purchase, like another storefront to purchase from. And there's so many positives to it. Right. And then if you end up falling to the, moody whims of one of the big platforms, you've still got that backup. You're not starting from scratch if you've already got it established.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just curious, going back to the podcast a little bit, like, okay, you've got 61 episodes out now. Do you have a theme or a direction that you're heading, or do you just kind of see where it goes and like the types of people who come on and kind of go along with it like that? Like, how do you create your show list? I'm curious.
There is no real plan. It's pretty much how I live my life. It's like making stuff up as I go along. So no, I am just like very much with the podcast because this is a fun thing for me. This was never created to be a moneymaker or anything other than fun and a way for me to learn and for listeners to learn too from other people in the know. And so it's a little bit of those, I'm just kind of going with the flow. So as I've progressed with this podcast, I have more and more people reach out to me rather than me having to reach out to other people, which is nice when people kind of come to me and want to be on the show. And then some people I'm like, oh, I don't think you're quite the right fit, but most of the time it's fantastic people. And so I tend to leave it a little bit up to the universe and just that, the people that I reach out to or feel that inspired action to reach out to, or whom feel that inspired action to reach out to me and feel like a good fit, there's a reason for that. And so there's a weird synchronicity that I hear all the time of like, oh, I really needed to hear that. Like that episode that you released, that was exactly what I needed to hear right now. Yeah. And and I find that too with the guests that I have on. Sometimes they'll say something and I'm like, wow, I really needed to hear that. So it's I probably, part of me wishes I was a little bit more planned out and that, yes, this is the theme and the direction we're going in. But no, there's no real rhyme or reason. I want lots of diversity. I want people to share their writing experience, particularly if listeners are new to just a few books in or just thinking about writing their first book. I want them to be encouraged by other people's stories, but also see, the ups and downs and that challenges are normal. And I also want more of those wonderful kind of craft things. Like I've had like Troy Lambert talk about plotting, and I've had the lovely Jessie Kniff talk about blurb writing recently. And I'm always open to the wonderful world of, it's not even really woo-woo, but that manifestation, which is really just a sidekick to mindset, that really going in deep and aligning your author career and your writing career with whom you are and your innate values and your strengths and everything. So that also includes like the lovely Claire Taylor, who came on to talk about the Enneagram. And I've had Becca Symes on as well, who's talked about, I think like author alignment and everything too. So there's just so much goodness out there. So I'm kind of like, bring it all to me. I want to share it with the world.
I'm definitely the same when it comes to podcast interviews. It's like, if there's something cool about what they're doing, it's like, I want to bring them on and like learn from them. It's so fun. For the solo episodes, I typically, I kind of think of a somewhat vibe that I want to go for. So like, for instance, when I started transitioning to the manifestation a little bit, I would try to keep a lot of the themes tied to whether it's, coming up to a release for a manifestation course, or like at the end of the year, I do like rapid release roadmap, obviously, and the Plan Your Series Challenge, which is now the 4 books, 5 days thing. And so trying to help them see the value in the courses or see the value in what they need. But other than that, I kind of leave it open to what's the weird thing that's coming up for me right now that maybe authors need to hear about. And so even though I'll have things planned out for the solo episodes and I'll have like a list of ideas beyond that, sometimes it will just be, hey, guess what, guys? Amazon created some new guidelines for AI. Let's talk about that today. Like it just, sometimes there's something that just comes up and we have to discuss it too. And it's kind of fun when that's the case, when it's just in some ways left up to the universe to give you that kick in the butt and inspired action, and then you move with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that with my solo episodes too, I quite enjoy recording them. I'm just really anxious letting them out in the world. But what I try to do with the solo episodes, much like you, is look at where I'm at, where I might be struggling, or the things that are, on the forefront of my mind, and just trust that, because I think we all need this reminder that we're not alone in any of these situations that we go through or experiences we have or feelings that we have, and that the right people are going to resonate with what we have to say.
Yeah.
And so, and that's just a trust that I'm always having to remind myself of with writing my books too, like it's always like, not everyone's going to love my books, but the right people will enjoy them, will get what I want out of them or get what they need out of them. So there's, putting a lot of trust kind of in the universe that I guess that our voice matters, that our experiences matter, whether it's through the podcast or through writing as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Oh my goodness. Could you remind my audience just a little bit about where they can find you, Jo, and like where they can locate your podcast and everything? I'm 100% sure that most of these people are probably already your super huge fans anyway, but just so like if they're new and they're finding out about you for the first time, see, I can't speak today. We were talking about getting the words together. Where do they go? There we go.
Yeah. So my website is jobuer.com, Jobuer. You can actually get to the same website by typing in alchemyforauthors.com. It takes you to the same place. And so that has my books. You can buy direct from me as ebooks at this moment. So it's got my books. It's got a little bit about me. And it's also got access to all the episodes of Alchemy for Authors and the show notes. So I have a few people who prefer reading rather than listening to the episode. And so you've got that option. So I'm mainly there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. I prefer Instagram, but I am on Facebook too. And you can find me under, my handle is @JoBuerAuthor. And you can also find me at Alchemy for Authors. So I've got the two kind of handles there. And that is really my main things. You can find my books. I'm wide, so you can find them pretty much anywhere: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple, everywhere, or request from libraries as well. That's a cool thing to do. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And same with my podcast too. You can listen to me pretty much anywhere. There's Spotify, Apple, Amazon. I've got audio only on YouTube as well. So lots of options. Just type in Jo Buer and I'm kind of everywhere. So yay.
Awesome. Well, Jo, thank you. Thank you so much for coming back onto the show and being a part of the podcast again. I love bringing you on the show. I wish we had more time to talk about all the things woo. So we're going to have to bring you back to do that soon. But
absolutely. I love that. I love that.
I love it. But we had so many cool things to be talking about today, like all the things about your new book and imposter syndrome. And I think so many authors need to understand that, getting out there in the local community is so important. And being a little bit afraid of it or imposter syndrome at that process, it's normal, And so I really appreciate you talking about it.
It has been so much fun. It's always so much fun chatting with you. So thank you so much.
Every time I bring Jo on this show, I am just always amazed and thrilled to speak with her. And the insights that she is able to provide are so profound. They really are. She's so humble about all of her, wonderful things that she's done, all of the avenues she's taken. I mean, she's working a full-time job, guys. So for those of you who are in her shoes, just know, like, if she can do it, you can do it too, right? And so, like, talking with Jo and listening to her journey and her story and understanding that, like, as she's gone out of her comfort zone into those places of like signing books or talking about her books to her local community, it became a mindset shift, not only for herself, but for her family as well. So if you're still in this place where maybe your, spouse or your close loved ones or friends even don't quite understand or view you as the author you're becoming, just know that sometimes it takes that external source, like going to a book signing and inviting them, for them to actually see what you're doing. Because, we're all a little bit skeptical. We're jaded, right? Not everybody understands the work and the process that goes into writing our books and getting them published. And so it's not until we're actually sitting down at a table talking to other readers who are listening to the book descriptions or what we've done with our writing and then selling those books in front of them, that it clicks into place. So be thinking about, like, is there a local community event that you can join in 2024? Is there a way that you can step out of your comfort zone and do something just a little bit bigger next year? Like, is there a new genre that you need to start writing in because you're getting burned out from the one that you've been writing in? Is there something new you can add that can reinvigorate your author career? That's really what Author Revolution is all about too, right? I've looked at that over the past couple of years and going, okay, what we really stand for is this idea that we can reinvent at any time. We can reclaim our author careers at any time. We can become the authors we were always meant to be at any time. There's nothing that stops us. We're only the ones that can stop our progress. We are the only ones who can decide if we are done or if we're going to pivot one more time. And so I love that you guys are with me on this journey. I love that you are with Jo Buer and the Alchemy for Authors podcast and her journey. We have so many incredible minds in the indie author space, and Jo is definitely one of them. So make sure that you head over to authorrevolution.org/212. Check out the transcript if you'd like to download that, or for sure check out the show notes because it'll give you a quick link over to Jo's podcast and her books as well. And just know, like, there are authors out there with the knowledge you're looking for. There are authors who are experiencing the same things you're experiencing. We are all, in this together. We're all kind of doing our best, trying to figure out how this gets to look, how it gets to work for us. And Jo has definitely highlighted that for me in this podcast episode as well. So don't worry about imposter syndrome. Trust that you've got this. Lean into what you know, lean into what you expect and get to receive. Like, what do you decide you get to receive? And just keep moving forward confidently, knowing it's yours, because it is. It's coming. It's always on its way to you. It's always in the process of being yours. Okay? Well, my friends, that's today's podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did recording it. And I hope you have a wonderful first week of December as we continue onward, getting closer to the holiday season. Go forth and start your author revolution.